Okay. Go ahead. Pledge allegiance.
Okay, yes. So we'll start the meeting. Join in pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so I do not have. Mr. Kennedy, do you have everyone's name on the? I don't have a.
Yeah, so just because Ted was, Mr. Phelps was elected chairman at the last meeting, but he wasn't here to be sworn in. So until that time, you would run the meeting. And then Joe's got his form. So, Ted, if you can stand and raise your right hand, we'll get this all cleaned up.
I don't know if he has to stand.
No, you don't have to stand. Sorry about that.
I state your name. Solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and the Charter and ordinances of the City of Loveland, and will obey the laws thereof, and will faithfully discharge the duties of Law and Ordinance Committee member upon which I am about to enter. Congratulations again.
Ted, you're now running the meeting. We're at open forum. I'm sorry. We're at roll call. I'm sorry.
We're at roll call.
I'm sorry. If it's easier, Brian can still run the meeting.
Right.
Brian.
So, all right. So roll call. Ted Phelps.
Here.
Kit Ping.
Here.
Sorry.
Here.
Oh.
Chris Schneider.
No, I know. I'm trying to remember the
Kelsey. He's
Sorry.
Not, Pete. He's not here.
Pete. Right.
Yep.
What's his last name?
Kelsey.
Pete Kelsey. He's not here. Should we vote to excuse him?
Yeah.
Okay. So I make a motion to excuse Pete Kelsey from tonight's meeting.
I'll second that.
And all in favor say aye.
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 All right. So, open forum. There are a few names here. So, Randy Campion.
Hello, I'm Randy Campion. I live at 220 South Riverside Avenue in Loveland. I attended the July 9th meeting of council to discuss the high levels of noise downtown, and it was suggested that I come to this meeting and see how you guys are doing. After that meeting, a police officer came to my driveway when I wasn't there, and he determined that the levels coming from downtown were high. I live 1,300 feet from downtown. And after that, I think the next day, Dave Kennedy called and said that he was going to do something about it to fix it. And the noise stopped that day. And thank you, Dave, for doing that.
I didn't do anything. Chief Gabrielson.
Oh, okay.
Chief Gabrielson put out a directive, so I didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay.
It was all
right, well,
Chief.
Okay. Well, for whatever reason, it stopped, even temporarily, I know. And that's a good thing. It's been pretty quiet since that time. We can still hear stuff, but I'm really here to talk about how you guys are going to fix it. I know I've read the different towns and the things that they have, and there's some good stuff in there. I also talked to Ali Rutella from, he's the event officer city of Madera, and more importantly, well, not importantly, but he was a CBO for Fairfield before he went to Madera. And he had some good things to say about how they treated events or any assembly use, anything that where there was going to be a gathering of people, and they looked at it on a case-by-case level, and it went to their planning commission to get approved. Okay, or planning, and I guess it's planning and zoning, I'm not really sure. But he said in Madera they didn't have outdoor music, but he said Fairfield was a lot stricter than Madera is. So I'd encourage you to give him a call. He was very, very informative. My feeling is, I listened to your last meeting, and I agree with you that you have to have an ordinance that protects the citizens and protects the businesses and is enforceable in a court of law. I'm a building official for City of Sharonville. I've taken people to mayor's court a bunch of times and circuit court downtown, district court. And, you know, sometimes the business owner will just say, well, it's just a $50 fine. I'll just pay the fine. Well, the next fine is $500 and the next fine is $1,500. They stop when it hurts. Okay, so you end up fining them $1,500 and then they don't do it anymore. We all do our taxes by April 15th, and it's because there's a penalty. So I want the ordinance to be written in such a way that it has some teeth to it, that an officer can decide what to do. Police officers will do whatever you want them to do, but they always look for, how am I going to defend this in court? So it has to hold up in court. You know, human nature is such that people will take the easy way out. They will push it until you tell them they can't, and that's why we are where we are right now. You know, I'm also here to find out what your timeline is, and you know, when you expect you'll have something, and what you've discovered so far. So, if you have any questions of me, I'm glad to answer anything.
Any questions?
Buy me a drink.
Well, thank you, Mr.
All right,
Campion.
thank you.
Appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir. Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Phelps has a question for you. I didn't realize.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the television didn't let me know he
You're
needed
just
to talk.
over there in the corner.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Hey, Mr. Campion, I appreciate your remarks. But the question I have for you, you outlined at the beginning of your speech there that you had the occasion where you made a call and it was taken care of. Have you had other high volume, high decibel level issues?
Oh, yes.
And how many occasions did you say?
We call all the time, and the police have always told us that they couldn't do anything until 11 o'clock, and the levels were way above what the ordinance says they are, and they have been for a long time. So I'm hoping that you come up with something that says this is the range, or if it's a police officer that says reasonable, we have to define what reasonable is. You know, so you know, the police need to have the tools to do the job too, but I know there's an economic development director, and there's a city mayor, and a city manager, and everybody on council, and you want business to come here, and I don't have anything against business, but I live here too. So you know, if we can work it out together, that's good. But whatever you come up with, it's got to be enforceable. I would say in the last, I know my neighbor has called over 60 times to the police. So I have not called as much, but I've called the police many times. So
Is this for one? Is it one establishment that's
not necessarily. I think that the night that I called the mayor about 3 weeks ago, angry, and it was like 11:50 at night. It had stopped 11:20, and it started back up at 11:30. You could hear it inside my bedroom. You know, it was very loud. Yeah, I mean, we've called the police, but my contention is it's too loud. It's louder than the ordinance right now. So that's what we need to monitor, is how loud it is. I don't have any objection to them playing music. You know, it's too loud.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ken Bottom.
My wife Joan and I live on North Wall Street, or more commonly called the Loveland Racetrack. And I don't know if this ordinance is designed to address cars and motorcycles. And if you don't live where we live on Wall Street or 48 or West Loveland Avenue, you may not be aware of how increasingly horrible it is on the weekends. Chief Mike, I've met with him several times, and things have improved over the last couple of years, but basically we have a law that's not being enforced. If you check with the police department, I think you'll find that there's been less than 2 or 3 citations some mornings, but no citations in the last few years. Chief Mike takes another approach. It's somewhat working, but I don't understand how a law that's federal, state, and I believe local is not enforced. These are people that have intentionally spent a considerable amount of money to make their cars and motorcycles as loud as possible, and they want everybody to know about it, and they have to putt through all this traffic downtown, and there's a few streets like Wall Street, when they get to it, boy, it's Katie barred the door because they just fled pedal to the metal. I've almost had several fist fights that I would have lost, but I just can't stand the attitude of these people. What I don't understand is why the law is not, why they're not cited. I mean, it's not like somebody that ran a red light by accident, you give them a warning. These people have spent considerable money to be an annoyance, and I don't think it's right. New York City got so bad with loud exhaust, the first offense is $800 and your vehicle is impounded until you correct the problem. This is not a hard problem to enforce. When I was 16, I lived in Withamsville, Ohio, and had a 51 Oldsmobile that I could not wait to jerk that muffler off of. And within about 3 weeks, the Claremont County Sheriff informed me that I couldn't do that. They did not cite me, and they didn't fine me. They said, you have 30 days to correct this problem, present yourself to the sheriff's office to prove it, or your license will be suspended until you do. It took me about 10 days to get that thing fixed. So there's a lot of ways to do this. I don't understand why it's not a citation, because we got plenty of, I could fill up a ticket book in a week, I think. So I'm hoping the noise and ordinance is going to include mufflers and cars, and which are against the law. And I'd like to see more enforcement and more citations and more impoundments, which legally you can impound a vehicle that has a modified law exhaust according to state and federal laws. And that's my story.
All right. Thank you, sir. We appreciate
Nobody's got any questions because I can't hear you.
All right. Sharon Scovanner.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Scovanner, and I live at 155 Overlook Drive. I think we can all agree that a majority of the noise coming from downtown comes from outdoor amplified sound. On any given night, noise can be heard from Cappy's, Cindy's, Hops and Berries, Bishop's Quarter, the Wicked Pickle, Cocoa Muse, the Landing Event Center, or the many city-sponsored or permitted events. The new amphitheater that Mr. Kennedy has said will be a regional outdoor music venue, and future development will compound that. While music from downtown is problematic, you should also be reminded that any noise ordinance adopted will affect everyone in Loveland equally. Whatever standard is adopted, that level of sound would also be allowed by your next door neighbor. What I heard at the last meeting is that a decibel meter standard is hard to enforce. An advantage that I see to that is that it gives a definite, measurable, non-subjective level that's allowed. The reasonable standard presents issues too, because who decides what is reasonable? And how can that standard be applied equally by the many police officers tasked with enforcement? It is also difficult because how would somebody know for sure if they are violating the ordinance? The standards should be precise and easy to enforce. I suggest that the standard for discretionary amplified sound should mimic Springdale, which says all noise from amplified devices shall be contained to the property. Why should I be able to impose unwanted noise onto my neighbor? My rights end at my property line, and so should everybody else's. My right to loud music ends when it interferes with my neighbor's rights to quiet. This standard would be easy to enforce and easy to self-regulate. Any standard different than this would allow property owners to extend their rights onto somebody else's property. How is that fair? Keep in mind that patrons of the bars can go home whenever they want quiet. Unfortunately, many of us cannot escape the noise. We are stuck. All property owners have the right of quiet enjoyment, which is a cornerstone of property rights in the U.S. Fortunately for businesses, there are potential solutions. This includes playing music indoors, installing acoustic fencing, green barriers, sound blankets, masonry or stone walls, outdoor curtains, and soundproofing panels. This past Saturday, there was a health and wellness expo in Nisbet Park. Loveland prides itself on protecting and improving the health of its people. Limiting noise pollution is an important aspect of that, as it helps reduce stress, improves sleep quality, and lowers the risk of other health issues like hypertension and heart disease. There was talk at the last meeting about exemptions for city events. I think it's important that the city follows the same rules for discretionary amplified sound that it sets for others. By doing so, you show that you take noise levels seriously for the health of our citizens and the employees who are subjected to the noise. Why would you not want to do that? Does the city think it's somehow special or better than everybody else? All events can still be had. It just shows that you care and want to lead by example. Rules for thee and not for me are hypocritical and unfair. This is especially important because the city sponsors so many events now. What about chamber events and other events approved by the city? Should all of these events be excluded from amplified sound regulations? That would be a huge number of exemptions. It should also be noted that the many attendees of city events aren't even citizens of Loveland. Of the 13,000 residents of Loveland, only a fraction attend any single event. That means that the majority of residents aren't present. Should we be exempting noise regulations for visitors and the minority of people attending the events over the majority of residents who don't attend? Personally, I can't attend any concerts sponsored by the city because the noise level exceeds what is safe. As one who has mild hearing loss, it's a risk I'm not willing to take. If you haven't spent any time downtown on a Friday or Saturday night in the summer, you need to do so. I think you'd be surprised how much noise there is and how far it travels. The city's organizational chart has its citizens at the top. Let's remember that when developing an ordinance that first meets their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. And with Courtney, is it Courtney Hauk? Did I say that right, sir?
Please.
Did I say your name right?
Courtney Hauk.
Hauk. Okay, then I did. All right, sir.
Okay, first, I'm kind of surprised there are not more people here. I think if it had been better known, I didn't even find out about it until a couple of days ago. Sharon actually asked me about it. There's a lot more people that have interest in this noise ordinance than just a few that are here. Okay, I live at 497 North 2nd Street, which puts me right at the rim of the Loveland Bowl. That would be northeast. I've lived there for 34 years. It used to be quiet and peaceful. I could enjoy the backyard and woods. Then came Bishop's Bar, soon to followed by other bars, most of which want live music with loud, not very good bands. Last summer, we even had a church in Nesbitt Park that only knew how to bang on a loud drum starting at 7:30 on Sunday mornings. You have been asked by City Council to come up with a noise ordinance. That worries me because I feel the City Council wants Loveland to be a version of New Orleans Bourbon Street, as per Bishop's Bar. The police department is needing a worthwhile ordinance to control the noise and property owners' complaints. After several years, we still don't have one. Tax-paying property owners seem to have no say or control over the situation. Council wants the noise and subsequent confusion. So your job is not going to be easy, and I feel not good for the residents that have to deal with the problem. I don't know why the bars need to have outdoor bands. The band's playing indoors during bad weather and during the winter. Why can't they play indoors at all times, which would make everybody happy? Special events at Nesbitt Park could still be done on special occasions. Loveland Council members take an oath when elected to increase property values and make life better for Loveland citizens. My property has been downgraded by the real estate companies from quiet to moderate noise, which also affects the property value. The mayor and city council members, for the most part, do not live in downtown Loveland and don't have to deal with the noise and traffic and confusion. Neither do the bar owners. They get to go home at night to peace and quiet. If you go to worldlawdigest.com, then noise ordinance laws in Ohio, you will see 55 to 65 decibels during the day and 45 to 55 after 10 o'clock, measured at the property line. Temporary public events can be higher. And as soon as my pages are stuck together here. General disbursement laws. Many jurisdictions and villages, including Warren County, use a broad, unreasonable noise law. If a band's noise unreasonably disrupts the comfort, health, or peace of the neighbors, it can be cited, regardless of the exact time or volume. I would rather see a decibel system used that would give everyone a definite level and not up to interpretation. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Yeah.
Any additions or corrections? So we have a motion to approve the minutes from the June 3rd, 2026 Law and Ordinance meeting.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. So now on to old business. Mr. Kennedy,
Hold on. Did Mr. Phelps vote?
he had to abstain. He wasn't here.
I didn't hear that.
Sorry. I don't think he said it, but I assume he silently abstained because he was not here. Mr. Kenny, would you like to discuss the old business?
So we were a little understaffed at the last meeting, so we sort of just had general discussion, and there was a couple directions from the committee. One was to follow up with Milford. Actually, spoke to Milford's police chief. Theirs is a little unique, and I included it. Theirs is specifically for their downtown district. the other things throughout the community are just directed through general offenses. So they've created basically what they call the River District, and the police chief was fairly content with it. He did not know of any current plans to revamp it. It's if you saw, that would be page 39 of your packet. So theirs is fairly specific. Penalties are pretty specific too, but they basically just say amplified. No person shall permit or allow amplified sound to be played or generated within the City of Milford River District after 10 p.m. Sunday through Wednesday, after 11 p.m. on Thursday, or after 12 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. And then the penalties go up from there. So there's just short and sweet. And then Mr. Schneider had asked maybe if we could find some that dealt with specific auditoriums or outdoor. I went through and couldn't find any outside of the Kettering, which was already there, but Dayton's was pretty comprehensive. I'm sorry, but that was supposed to begin at 94.01. It's really just some more definitions, but I'll get that to you. And then it sort of comes down to, in effort to craft it, it sort of comes down to what's the time frame that you sort of think is reasonable. Do you want it specifically for the downtown district? I think everyone's agreed. We don't need it in the zoning code and in 3 different places. And then do you want to edge more towards reasonableness or hit with decibels and so on and so forth? Talking to the chief at Milford, when theirs closes, it's hardcore. I mean, there's no sound that they patrol at certain hours of the day. Our current regulations are a shorter time frame than Milford's. But those are really, all of this was just to provide you with some information so you could begin putting together drafts and crafting those and getting as much residential input and hopefully some input of the downtown business owners too, and try to find a balance. I have to agree with Courtney. It's not going to be an easy process, but somewhere in there, I feel like I saw a lot of good things in Madeiras. I would think there's had a lot of interesting parts that I think were relevant. And Randy even mentioned that. But at this point, it's really, what direction do you guys feel like you want to go toward?
I mean, to me, if I could just start, I think that there's some very basic questions we have to answer before we even begin to start to think about language or things. And it's really which direction that is going to be most effective. And there's discussion about, times, like you mentioned, the Milford statute. The question, though, is should someone be able to play music at whatever level they want to at 9:59, but not at 10? And, for me, I think the first question is, should this be structured in that way where there's a time component to it, or simply say that at all times of the day it can't be unreasonable, and to define what unreasonable means so that the police could enforce it equally across the board no matter what time it is, and just say, well, it's unreasonable it's unreasonable under the circumstances, and therefore it would be a violation. Of course, we would have to define what unreasonable means. And I think some of the statutes talk about, I think if you can hear it 100 feet from the property line is one definition in one of the cities. So I think one of the first questions we have to answer is the structure of it. If it's going to be a reasonable standard, should a time component be a part of it? And somebody mentioned the decibel levels, and I certainly understand the idea that it gives you the sense of something that's definite and specific. The problem, I think, for the police is if you say it can only be a certain decibel level, at the property line. When you try and use one of those decibel meters, there could be a lot of other noises that you have to take the idea of it and then bring it into a courtroom and see, how are we going to enforce this? How can someone be convicted of the ordinance? And if you use a decibel level at the property line, it builds in a defense almost Well, there's other noises that exist in that area that was causing that decibel level, not our noise. So it makes it difficult to enforce that. And I think that's where the police department is having trouble with the decibel levels right now. The other thing I will say, I think that we need to really think about what penalties are going to be used in this statute. From my perspective, I think making this a minor misdemeanor, enhancing from there, is not sufficient enough, because the maximum fine is $150 for minor misdemeanor. And if you own a business that continually violates, if you're simply looking at $150, $250, that's probably not going to be a deterrent. So maybe something like making this an unclassified misdemeanor, where off the bat the maximum fine is $1,000, depending on what the court chooses to do based on it, whatever violation is. I think that's another thing we need to think about. But I think we need to. I think a good start today would be to define those very basic notions of where this should go. And from my perspective, I think that moving away from the decibel levels, it makes sense, other than, and I know the chief mentioned this last time and we discussed it afterwards, and I think this might make some sense. One decibel level you can't debate is when you're at the source. So if a police officer walks into a building with a decibel meter and says, if the law has like a per se violation, over 75 decibels or 100 decibels at the source is a per se violation. Well, then the person who's being cited can't argue with some other noise, because they're sitting right inside the location. So that could be kind of a hybrid, where it's reasonableness generally, but also there could be a per se violation for being over a certain level at the source. So anyway, I just want to throw out some ideas about what we could discuss and think about when we're starting to think about crafting this.
I found that interesting that Madeira it always stuck out to me. It's theirs is all similar to Milford, sort of short and sweet. No person operating a restaurant, hotel, summer garden, or other place of refreshment or entertainment shall permit or engage in the playing or rendition of music as of any kind, singing, loud talking, or other noises on or about the premises in such manner as to disturb the peace and quiet of two or more separate residences. I wonder how they came up with that. Just that is unique to the rest of them, that they specifically said, basically, well, thanks for calling, Randy, but no one else has called, and then I guess somebody else calls and that triggers it. I mean, Madeira's pretty well thought in a lot of what they do. That just seemed unique of all the ones that I read. That's basically what it's saying. It would take two residents. I guess they figure if two people have called, it's enough that they need to.
That's a shot at defining what's reasonable.
Yeah, that because they don't really.
I think I agree with Brian in that I think we could use a hybrid approach, reasonableness with the decibel level as a backup provision, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
And I think measuring at the source is, or 100 feet off. What was it? Was it maybe 100 feet off source, off the property line? Measure the decibel level at that point. Maybe that's easier to do. Give a definitive number. I don't know. But I think that's a way to combine these. And I think short and simple is probably the best way to go too. We have what do we have? 4 different provisions on noise in Loveland.
Yeah.
And if we can consolidate them into something, it doesn't have to be as short and sweet as Madeira, but I noticed a couple of these different municipalities have more concise regulation than we do. And I think that may be the way to go.
Well, I think it certainly makes sense not to have the sound ordinances be in 3 separate sections of the.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
Some time ago, I started looking at this before there was even a notion of doing this. I started looking at what is a noise ordinance in Loveland. And I've been an attorney for 28 years, and it took me a lot of work to find all the different sections that apply to what noise is in the city of Loveland. And it shouldn't be like that. I mean, a citizen should be able to look at it and see what a citizen or a business should be able to look at and see what is expected and what is a violation. So anyone else have any thoughts?
I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
So when they talk about the decibel restriction or that system, you mentioned the name of property. So if I'm hearing the discussion correctly, that is referring to the source property line. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
So what Ted, to clarify, what I meant was those are, from what I was trying to say, was two different things. So if you say measure the decibel level at the property line or somewhere outside of the specific area where the noise is coming from, then that creates the potential issue with enforcement where they could claim, the person being cited could claim, well, there were other noises that were contributing to that decibel level. Therefore, you can't prove that I'm the sole source, right? But if you go, when I say to the source, if you for example, if you go inside a business with a decibel meter and the police officer stands there inside the business and takes a level, if we say in this ordinance, okay, if there's a measurement at the source of above X number of decibels, then that's easily enforced because the officer can come in and say, look, I had the meter, I was standing inside the business and it was above this per se level.
My fundamental question is there any consideration, or is it even crazy to suggest that could a decibel level be taken at the complaining parties' properties? You could just pull things at the overlook and read it. If it was above a certain level, that would be, I guess.
Well, we did talk about that last week, and I think one of the problems is the ambient, what Brian was saying as well, the ambient noise level at that complainant's property could be impacted by multiple different things, and the party that we think is violating the noise ordinance can say, well, look, yes, my music's loud, but so is the neighbor, my business partner neighbor over here, his noise is loud, and that's what's causing the problem. Together, the two of them create an ambient noise level that exceeds the decibel level. That's why I would suggest say.
By somebody who would be cited, and they can make that defense.
Right.
I would think a police officer could say, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's the music coming from X place," and make a reading there.
Well, here's my thought. My thought is exactly what you're talking about would be the reasonableness standard. The officer can go out there and say, look, this is clearly impacting the peace and quiet of this neighborhood, and it's coming from X location, and I'm sure of it. And then you have a decibel measure, go down and measure 100 feet off of that, and I say outside, and I'll get to this in a minute, outside of the offending property, measure it 100 feet away or whatever that level is, and have a decibel level, a permissible decibel level within that range. And if it exceeds that range and the officer says this is an unreasonable level of noise at the complainant's property, then you got two ways of saying, look, X business, this is your problem. You're in violation. And the reason I say measure outside at some distance from the place is if you go in the building and you take a reading from within, you're not considering the fact that, well, maybe he's insulated his walls and now he's got a defense, right. or maybe he put a green screen, or maybe they've got a curtain up or something outdoors, and he can say, well, look, yeah, you're reading it inside, but outside, I'm not in violation. But if the reading comes from outside and he's in violation,
right,
then. But I think it starts with that reasonableness standard, which is how we use both tactics together.
Right. No, I mean, I agree. And Ted, that's exactly what I was saying. The answer to your question is that if the idea is the police go to the place where the complainant is and they experience what the complainant is experiencing, if you say that the standard is what is reasonable, then the officer, based on that alone, would have the ability to issue a citation because they're seeing that, in fact, at that moment, that noise is unreasonable for those circumstances, versus having to try and rely on the decibel meter, which is much more easily attacked when you're trying to enforce it in court, is what my thoughts are. Yeah.
Is with this term you're using, though, reasonableness. This kind of goes to the question that was posed earlier in the open forum of what kind of a community is this? Is it Bourbon Street? Is it a country charm, that type of thing. And so as a measure of reasonableness, without some sort of description of that. I mean, if that's the way things are going to go, that becomes, I think, a question, I guess, in my mind is how legally well you can define that. And I keep going back to these cases that have been around for years. You know, the right to free speech, but you can't yell fire in a place. And, you know, what is pornography? Well, you know it when you see it. You know, these kinds of things. This, to me, strikes me as a similar sort of thing, that if it's not defined as to what is reasonable, then that's a creeping scale that moves around. And so there does have to be some way that we define that. And, you know, it kind of, you know, when I look at what Milford has and what some others have, you know, there's the time component to it as well, which is another aspect of reasonableness. You know, at 10:01 or at 11:01 or 12:01 or whatever, you know, all of a sudden it goes from here to here immediately, and it has to happen. You know, maybe there's some sort of aspect to reasonableness that has to do with the time of day that is a sliding scale or something like that. So I like the idea of, you know, that Mr. Snyder has brought up of some duality here, that, you know, you have more than one way of doing this, that makes it both reasonable for the person that's making the complaint to even bring the complaint, you might say, but then it also provides a way to measure it. The other thing, going back to the comment on the dollars and cents of it, there has to be some enforcement to this, or it's a total waste of our time to be sitting here and everybody being talking about this. It can't be just something soft. I mean, we have ordinances on the book right now that are not being enforced in other places, and part of the reason for that is just they're so trivial. You know, it matters what the end result is going to be for the penalties and so forth. So I would say, I mean, we're hitting on all the right points. The hard part's going to be getting them all collected together and worked into a decent ordinance. But, you know, it seems like there's components to all these things that make perfect sense. And so I don't think it's a one or the other sort of thing that we have to do on whether it's time or dollars or decibels or any of the other. I would kind of like to see us trying to blend all of these things into something that for the police department doesn't become a nightmare to enforce, that they've got officers tied up constantly with he said, she said, and that sort of thing. So again, I think, you know, there's all of these things that we're talking about, I think, are very valuable to the ordinance, not just one or two.
Well, I think that, I mean, I totally agree. Obviously, we're going to have to define what reasonableness is if that's one of the approaches we're going to take. One thing that comes to my mind reading all the other examples we have is, like I mentioned earlier, I can't remember which city, but one city says reasonableness or reasonable noise is noise that doesn't emanate past, like, 100 feet from the property line or something, right? So if you wanted to incorporate a time component with a reasonable standard, you could say between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. what is reasonable is, just an example, if you can hear it 250 feet from the property line, but then after 10 p.m. what's reasonable is if you can hear it 80 feet from the property line. What you can make it a different standard as you go on in time, but still use kind of that reasonableness approach. And then I agree with you and Chris both, which is you do that, but also you have that kind of per se, which when I say per se, I just mean that by the very nature of this, it is a violation. It's not whether it's reasonable, but if you add to that per se, which Chris, you're talking about, wherever you want to say that limit is, if it's outside the building, 50 feet outside the building, whatever it might be, if you're above a decibel level at that point, then it's a violation regardless of any other component. I mean, you could do all of those things in one ordinance, and I think it would, and Captain, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that approach would probably be more enforceable by the police department.
I would suggest that it not be too long.
Mm-hmm.
Something simple for us to understand. I won't get too in the weeds on reasonableness. We use that every day. I mean, basically, you can't supplant common sense. You can't find it, and that's pretty much what that is. The reasonableness we use in other things that we do, you have to be able to denote what that those things were that caused it to be unreasonable. So that's going to be on us regardless. But yes, if you had something that's simple, that's easy for us and the citizens and the establishments to understand, I think that's probably the best way to go, that incorporates all that. If you want to include the decibel level, there are some issues with that for us. Possibly something that's high enough that it's, for lack of a better term, a no-brainer. So that even slightly under that probably tells you. So there's a little buffer. So that's just a suggestion. But so I would say that you're going to have to be a little bit all incorporating, because even the good people who spoke here today, they're not all said the same thing. There's some differentiation. So there's a lot to play in this.
Captain, when we talk about measuring decibel levels, what are your thoughts on what we've kind of bandied about here? The measuring at the source, or a distance from the source, or at the complainant property. I know Ted wasn't here last week when you were talking about.
I don't have an issue with measuring place. The issue becomes the validity of the measurement.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting at.
We don't have like 15 meters. So you may get this call and don't have it in your car, and you go to the house, we don't have one. So there would be more of a reasonable judgment of go and get one, go to the source, and then find out and stuff like that. So I think it's not always just cut and paste as far as how things go. You have to be adaptive. So if you have that includes both things, and there are some options in there for us, then it's not something where we're put in a corner. We don't have this, so now therefore we want to be in that position.
Right.
Mr. Brown, I think you wanted to.
I just wanted to weigh in on the enforceability issue. I'll remind everyone we're in Claremont County, our downtown, even though some of the complainants are in Hamilton County. Recently, in a neighboring community, we rewrote our noise ordinance and actually had it challenged in court. And we did run into a problem with the decibel levels in Claremont County. And the reason is the judge said that it was the burden of the officer to establish that the device was calibrated, which is an issue that we need to think about because they carry these devices around with them. So we amended our ordinance to say it had to be calibrated and that the officer had to check to make sure that it's calibrated. And then we had to have a set amount of time that they recorded it at that decibel level. And we had to purchase equipment for all of our cruisers because, as you know, if a certain officer responds and the noise is there, they can't then wait for another officer to come with the decibel device to determine. So there's a cost involved. There's some real finessing to the language. But I will tell you, one of the things I learned from that case is that residents, and personally myself, were extremely disappointed when you measure decibel levels. What I thought was very loud, the decibel reader told us was not. I was in someone's backyard with an officer because we were doing our due diligence, and it was quite frankly very annoying, the noise. But the device was telling us that it rose not really above normal nature sounds. And I think it goes back to what Mr. Schneider was saying. It picks up various noises around it. And it was not, in my opinion, really giving credence to what we were really hearing. We changed our ordinance in that community to say 150 feet from the source of the noise, which is, I think, something you were mentioning, versus the complaining party's source. And we got a lot better compliance, and we were able to establish, even with the noise readers that they were using, that it was rising to what I thought was a better representation of what was there. But the judge in Claremont was extremely critical of the decibel level, which if we were trying to enforce it, we would be going to Batavia. Unless we could establish it was calibrated. The officer was also trained and knew how to use it, and that we knew it was calibrated on that date. But I would say the hybrid is probably a smart move, because if a judge has the ability to say, is it reasonable or I think these are all words that we really need to be careful when we're crafting this. The only other thing that I would chime in on as to enforceability is I heard some residents talking about exempting city events. We cannot discount school events as well. The city of Loveland has a football athletic field up there, and as you know, it's surrounded by residences. We had the same problem in Miami Township with the Milford High School being surrounded by residents. Any high school was going to be surrounded by residences. Does that mean that you cancel all of your athletic events? I would say no, but I think that you need to look at those exemptions, and maybe that's where you look at, the noise within 30 minutes of an event ending, or, things like that. I think we need to be thinking about those for Loveland as well. We're very focused right now on the downtown corridor, as I believe we should be. And perhaps Dave's right. We come up with a different standard for here, but we have other noise issues as well here in the city of Loveland. Residences are completely surrounded by an athletic field, both at the middle school, intermediate school, and at the high school. And on Saturday afternoons, if you've ever attended a Loveland Tigers football game, they play music, marching music, and they announce. And anyone that lives in those surrounding neighborhoods is going to be impacted by that. So I think those are just some of the things that I took from the comments that we should definitely take into consideration. But I will also tell you, we've done a lot of research in advance of tonight. We've not seen the reasonableness standard attacked. We've seen both decibel and reasonableness upheld in various circumstances. But I think we have to remember the officer who responds and walks into a situation, and they're literally responding to a phone call. They have to know what they've got to do. They've got to know what's going to be enforceable. And I think the duration as well as the decibel and the standard are all very important.
Brian, it would appear, though it was in '97, that Springdale tried to define reasonable. If you look at packet page 30, so they wrote, in determining whether a noise is of such a character as to unreasonably disturb the peace. I'm not saying that their 5 did it, but you can see they were trying to come up with a litmus test. Mm-hmm. Complaints of neighbors regarding the noise, the time of day which the noise takes place, the intensity and duration of the noise, the type of noise produced, and the alternative means. I'm not saying that those are the 5, but you can tell they sat in a room similar and decided we're going to try to give our police officers something to use as a guidance for reasonableness. And I'm not saying that those are.
I think we may be able to take portions of different municipalities' definitions and combine them. Mason does a nice job. That's on page 13. They did a nice job with the unnecessary, excessive, offensive noise. And if you combine that with Springdale, you're on your way. That's pretty good standards, I think.
Is there a means by which you were mentioning earlier, Brian, the different misdemeanor versus others? Is there a process that could be a part of this that's more of a, for lack of a better term, a stepped approach, where the first time a complaint is filed, there's one set of measurements, and then if it rises to another level, additional things kick in, or does that run afoul of legal process to have to? Because what I'm thinking is, it seems very easy for the run-of-the-mill noise complaint to have something that maybe is more of the reasonableness side of things, and then on the second complaint, it perhaps elevates to we're going to have a calibrated instrument brought in. We're going to do this very specifically. We know that this is going to be done at this point and so forth, rather than it being a requirement for every time. Does that make any sense, or does that cause problems?
Well, from one thing that Mr. Braun just said, this has me thinking a lot, and it's really a very, very good point, is what are we as a city getting ourselves into from a financial perspective and an enforcement perspective by using decibel levels? I mean, certainly we've already discussed what limitations exist using those machines anyway because of the ambient noise. But the fact that you've had that experience here in Claremont County specifically is really gives me a lot of hesitation, because now I think that still doing kind of the within 150 feet, 100 feet source thing we're talking about, I mean, I still think that's a good idea, because, as you said, it gives the police officers 2 things. But the fact that they can go in court and say it's either the level or unreasonable is good. But to your question, Kip, I think that the reason why I mentioned making an initial violation an unclassified misdemeanor is that an unclassified misdemeanor in Ohio, the penalty goes up to $1,000 for whatever violation it is. Now, because of home rule in Ohio, cities can have penalties greater for their ordinances than state statutes have. So we can really do whatever penalty we want to. We could say the first offense is an unclassified misdemeanor. The next offense is a misdemeanor of the first degree. We can, of course, the most serious it can ever be is misdemeanor of the first degree. And the point is not necessarily to look at the potential for jail time. The point is to look at a financial incentive to make it a deterrent rather than, as you said, just a nuisance. Now, I don't know what other components you could include in that beyond just really, jail time, again, it exists in these penalties, but it's not really the focus, obviously. What other things could you include in a penalty section beyond just a financial penalty? I don't know there is anything that, like the gentleman, Mr. Bottom, mentioned earlier about impounding a car. Well, of course, if you retrofit a car in a way that's illegal, the car can be impounded. You can't really do things like that with a business or a residence that's creating excessive sound. So I'm not sure.
Well, if you had a license that was required to have music outside of your facility,
mm-hmm.
and as part of that licensing process, you had a set of rules that you have to follow, that would be a way of doing
Sure.
something more significant, because now, we're not just talking about, a fine that might or might not be a big deal to somebody. Depends on how much money they're making on all these concerts. I don't know.
Right.
But if you lost your ability to have outdoor concerts, that would probably be much more important to you than whether it's $100 or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would see that as the version of impounding a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal.
Sure.
It's not just a little thing. And again, that would have to have some sort of stepped basis, I would think. Do you take it? How long do you take it away for if you're going to do that? You can't just take it away in perpetuity. There has to be some limit to that. The other thing that kind of strikes me too with this is we keep talking about distances. Some of these distances that are listed in these documents are pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
I live a mile from downtown, and I can hear music all the time. That I don't think that's necessarily unusual. I used to live out by the high school, and you always knew that fall was coming when you started hearing this tap, tap, tap of the drumsticks, because they'd practice right behind our house. So, you don't have to be that close. And incidentally, we can hear them as well from our house because we're about a mile from the high school. So we have lots of different noises. None of them are at high decibel levels, though. And so that, again, gets back to trying to define this notion of reasonableness, I think, because somebody else might be bothered by that. So, again, I just come back to, trying to codify all this stuff is, 250 feet is really not very far when we're talking about a business that is trying to run downtown. And, Bishop's is more recent, but some of these businesses have been here for a very long time and have been doing their thing. And so it's not like this just became an issue in the last year. It's been something that's been around for a period of time. And these businesses, they have expectations as well for being able to operate their business. So, that's enough said on that.
Well, man, I think certainly, I think everyone here would say that what we're trying to do, our hope is to find a balance between respecting the ability of businesses to operate and make a profit. And certainly that's what we want to see happen for everyone, but also respecting the rights of people that live residentially in those areas not to be overwhelmed by it. So, that's in one question that another more basic question comes to my mind from what you just said, Kip, which is right now, the framework is, okay, for sound amplifying noise, you can have, our ordinance exists right now, you can have an exemption that allows you to play music outside within certain parameters, whatever. And that's where you're getting at, revoking that license or suspending or whatever. I was thinking earlier, should we even have that system where there is, I mean, how do you meld that into this? So let's say you generally just have a reasonableness standard and you're trying to be more simplistic and more kind of direct about it. If you just say, well, the police can cite you if you're creating noise that's unreasonable, and we define what unreasonable is, well, then is there a need to have some special permit to play outside, not play outside? Because either it's reasonable or it's not reasonable. Either it fits the definition or it doesn't fit the definition. I mean, do we need to have that additional framework that creates these permits and exemptions, or should we just have a basic law that says this is what reasonable is, and whatever action you're going to take, whether you're going to play music outside, play music on your deck, play music inside your business, whatever it is, that it has to fit within that general definition. And that, I mean, I'm just saying that's a question. I don't know the answer, but I think that's a question to consider.
Well, and it's also something that comes back to, again, other comments that have been made tonight. This ordinance is not just about the downtown district and what the bars down here are doing. It's also about what happens when somebody rents a house here in Loveland and decides to have a huge party one weekend. It's right in the middle of everything. Or, the what was brought up earlier about the street noise. I just asked somebody the other day, I live on West Loveland, and I just asked someone the other day whether or not they had noticed that it seems like this summer has been a lot louder than what it has been in the past. And is that just my imagination or not? With a lot of motorcycle and the wind-up cars, as I call them, the ones that sound like they're coming apart. So yeah, I mean, it goes beyond that. And so as we're doing this, I think we also have to keep in the back of our minds, we're not just doing an entertainment district sound ordinance. We're doing a sound ordinance. And so what's the police officer going to do with the person who calls? And by the time the police officer gets there, the car's gone. I mean, there's no decibel meter that's going to be used because it's gone. There's no reasonableness to it. How does that fit into the noise ordinance as well? And how do we empower the police to address that? Because I think that is becoming more of an issue in town. And so I don't know, do we break this up into pieces and we have districts, or do we have sections that are addressing, commercial businesses versus private residences versus street traffic? Or how do we break that into something that can be handled for all of these things?
Well, I mean, for me, the way I've kind of envisioned it as we've been talking about this, I think you would always need to have an additional section to deal with noise coming from motor vehicles and motorcycles. I think you need a separate section for that to specifically enable the police to enforce that activity. And I know most of the jurisdictions where we have examples do that. And certainly, Mr. Bottom, I know you're correct. And I mean, I just personally, it does drive me a little crazy when I hear those cars as well. And because it's not just the noise, it's that they're intentionally doing that. So certainly we need to make sure that's a part, but I would think that would be a separate portion. And I totally agree with the idea that we need to always keep in mind this is going to be something enforced throughout the entire city. That's why if we're able to craft kind of a general reasonableness standard, maybe that is the kind of, I don't want to say one size fits all, but something that can be broadly enforced versus breaking up into different areas. I mean,
Well, I guess the part of the reason for the question too is the more you think about this, the more it starts kind of growing legs in every single direction. It seems like it's a fractal or something. The food truck thing that has been done was down at Shoppers Haven. Right now that's not too big and it's kind of contained and so forth. But what if that keeps getting more and more involved and goes later and later into the evening, and as it expands and grows, it could become something, and it's not in a downtown district. So if we make this into districts, that can cause a different set of problems. And so it's a difficult issue to try to compartmentalize without running into those sorts of barriers.
And I think drawing districts at this point would be really problematic, and it would take a lot longer than residents are willing to wait for this noise ordinance.
Do you want to attack like the sort of get the definitions
Give me one second.
and then work on what we think are if we the one thing I do think I think this is a good sample of and if we then took these and then started breaking it out, like Kettering's another one and theirs is a newer one, 2019, that they try to specifically define reasonable. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, and Dan and Mike both came from there, but they're basically no person shall recklessly cause an amplified sound, loud music recorded, so on and so forth, to one, disrupt normal activity, including without limitation, sleeping, studying, dining, so on and so forth, including without limitation, work of persons within place of business. And noise shall be presumed unreasonably allowed if uninvited noise is plainly audible at a residence receiving property or part thereof greater than 100 feet away. I think one of the things we could do is start biting this, categorizing these a little bit based upon breaking it down. And maybe I could have done this in the first place was here's from these samples, here's everyone's definitions of reasonableness. From these samples, here's what we feel are some of the better definitions of each item. I agree. I believe that by law, you really need the motor vehicle to be in its own motor vehicle section, or I think it ends up working against Ken because I think it doesn't fall under the same process and it actually, it works against him. So, but you could throw dogs in here. You could throw all other noises in here and have one noise ordinance, take it out of zoning, leave or strengthen what's in the vehicle one. If Joe and if they could maybe tackle how we could make the noise one a little stronger. And then I think, and we put it on the big screen, I think that help us form what it's going to be, because I think getting input from residents and the businesses along the way is pretty important. I don't think we're going to have this done by the next meeting by any stretch of imagination. Nor, I mean, let's put it this way: it'll be quicker than the lighting ordinance. Remember that one?
Yes. So then I guess one way to kind of think about this is, obviously this is just a ground level starting point. Our discussion tonight really is more a matter of getting a sense of kind of where we even are starting, right? So maybe when we meet again, the best thing we could do is to have start to try and create different, I don't know if sections is right because we're not writing the ordinance itself right now, but just a idea of what a reasonable definition would be, an idea of what, if there's the per se portion, what that could look like, and begin to bring these different elements of these ordinances, and of course we can create our own languages as well, and start to build these basic building blocks towards where we're trying to go.
We have always found, and Chris will vouch for that when he just redid the zoning code, that this is a very valuable device when we have it on there, and when we have the actual document on there. I'll try to put together what I feel is what you're asking for. I think there's certain liberties that have to be adjusted because of the city, but I read every one of these. And some of them really stood out. Some of them seem old-fashioned. So I always looked at the date. And but I think I just know our police officers and I know our downtown businesses. That first call that leads to that first visit, I think in most circumstances would seal it. But it's certainly registered, logged in. If you're back 2 days later, I think that's where the police get involved and how this now, okay, look, now you got the nice courtesy call. Now we're back here again. I think part of that is where you get a little bit more into the specifics, because I don't know that anyone in the downtown's not unreasonable. If you want to make 10 o'clock the end time, then, that's something you got to decide. You got to decide what's the end time. Does it change during the week? And are you going reasonableness, maybe with a backup for decibels? It's going to be citywide, but it's certainly for now going to read mostly like it applies to the downtown district. Though who knows what the future of Love and Madeira Road is? Who knows? With all of that's going to happen there. But I think industrial sounds. When I first got here, there was a big issue with one particular business at the Commerce Park, and we ended up solving that. He ended up just got tired of listening to him and put a muffler on it. But that was obviously, from my standpoint, I had to walk softly. Obviously, for most of the industrial park's a major important part of the city. So, but that was the first thing I approached in 2014 was a business. I'm not going to call him out, but we worked and he made the changes. So I agree. I don't know that we really need the Milford version. You'd end up having to change it someday. What do you think, Chris, as far as?
No, I agree with you. I do have a question for the lawyers. Can you when you do a citation, can it be different for a business than a homeowner? Meaning, because my concern is, the only thing I'm gleaning from this, if we don't want to break it up into districts, which I tend to agree, I do feel we just got to be, if somebody's got a house party and it's literally just a house party, it's not this Airbnb and they screwed up, they had music too loud. We just got to be cognizant of, $1,000 pretty harsh.
Well, it's $0 to $1,000.
0 to 1,000.
So
but it would be but you were referencing
the reason why you do an unclassified misdemeanor is because that gives whoever if it's in mayor's court, the mayor's court magistrate, if it's in municipal court, the municipal court judge, they have the option of giving a $50 fine or a $500 fine, depending on the history, the circumstance, the nature of what took place. So that gives that discretion to the person that's ultimately levying the punishment, but it gives the option to go higher than what like a minor misdemeanor will be. So the limit isn't the low end, it's the high end.
Yep.
That's the main issue with using the lower level misdemeanors, because you can't go higher. You can always go down.
What does it end up being as far as the misdemeanor? Is it a minor misdemeanor? Like, say it's an individual. Say I owned a house, and what would it be?
It's just an unclassified misdemeanor.
Unclassified. Okay, see, I'm not familiar.
So, for example, the first time you get charged with driving under suspension now is an unclassified misdemeanor.
Okay.
You don't actually face the potential for jail time, but you face a fine. Then
fines can be
right.
Got it.
Now, one thing that you asked in the question, I know I mentioned this, Mr. Braun. One thing I think we need to make sure that we include in this is the notion of having both personal and corporate liability, so that you can cite a business versus citing the assistant manager that happens to be sitting there that night, right? They may be part of the problem, but you want to have the ability to issue a citation to the corporation, and you can create corporate criminal liability in the statute. And I think that's something we need to make sure to include in this, so that the police have the authority to issue citation to the business as well, which is part of, I think, that too. But I mean, all those factors, Chris, could be taken into account at the time of sentencing, and having that unclassified misdemeanor gives that flexibility to do that.
Gotcha.
I just think that it needs to have,
I agree,
more upper end potential.
Yeah, that explains it for me. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure there was. Yeah.
And then the next question is, as Kip was saying, the next question is, if we say the first offense is this unclassified misdemeanor, what do we do for a second or third offense? How do you make it more serious?
Mm-hmm.
You could say the second offense is between $250 and $1,000 or something like that. Or you could say, like Kip said, you could make it a component of a permit we issue or whatever. But I think that's the other real challenge is what is the escalating nature? Because I think it needs to be escalating. What is the escalating nature of the violation, so that whoever continues to violate it is going to feel the pinch of being cited for it?
Well, is that the direction you want to go? I think I know enough to bring you it's not really a draft. It's a format, I think.
Right.
A format with highlights under each. I think we know the way this thing is going to go. Chapter headings, so on and so forth. And then under that, the formats within.
The only other thing I would mention is regarding, for me, and maybe this is just me, for me, the time issue really is concerning. I don't want to have a statute that says that only after a certain time is this ordinance enforced. Now, right now, the zoning ordinance says between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. it's X number of decibels, and 10 p.m. thereafter is a different level of decibels. I don't know that that works. But I guess the question is, should it be that the time of day is a component of whether that noise is reasonable, so there's no specific noise limitation, or should it be we define reasonableness to be this during these hours and this during these hours? I guess that's...
I think it's got to be the reasonableness is during these hours, and after that hours, there's no music.
just nothing. Okay.
I think that's what most people do, right, Chris?
Yeah, but I think it would help. It would help to have to grant establishments or a special event outdoor music permits. I do kind of like the idea of permits, because then you I don't know. I'm just thinking through that, but I do see where there's an advantage to granting outdoor music permits. And then you would have a time attached to those, so that they would have to stop playing, whether they're over the threshold of reasonableness or not. They're done playing at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever it is, because they may turn. We don't really. I don't. There could be, you could have an officer that believes it truly is reasonable, but they're still playing at midnight outside. That's not okay either.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
You could have a permit and still require reasonable.
Right.
Correct. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that could be just a condition. That
It would just give the establishment the ability. So basically, we're saying nobody can play music outside unless you have a permit. So,
Right.
which I kind of like that idea.
Right. And then the
yeah.
permit would have certain conditions, which it could be reasonableness, obviously a time limitation. I mean, and then it could be incorporated into the penalty section that if they have a permit for outdoor noise and this is the second violation, then that permit is suspended for 30 days or whatever it might be.
Or the other opportunity there with a permit process is it could be something that is a permit process that is a business that says we want to have concerts all the time,
Mm-hmm.
year-round rooftop concerts, or that's a different thing than a special permit, perhaps, that is something like 4th of July fireworks that don't start until 10 o'clock at night. Well, that's going to violate a noise ordinance, and it's just the way it is. And so, maybe there's one-off type of things, which again gives an opportunity to have a different set of controls over what's going on, because there are going to be events and things that, and this kind of goes, I guess my point is this goes to whether or not the city is complying. The city is a different animal to me, because those are specific events on specific timelines, not something that's like a bar that's doing it all the time. And so there's different ways that could be structured. Yeah.
Mr. Phelps, is there anything you would like to say? No, he's there. He's there.
He's muted.
I think he's trying to talk, but he's muted or something.
You're muted, Ted.
Uh-oh.
While he's working on the mute button there, one other thing.
Yes, go right ahead.
Weird. Wasn't allowing me to click on it. I think, we probably just need to know, we know kind of the nuances that need to be considered, that we can move into, looking at some language. And probably it's going to take a couple meetings. We can look at the language, and then I think definitely maybe at the following meeting, we invite business to come in and talk to us as well.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to have to make a decision on whether or not we're going to be granting permits or not, or whether there's a rule for all downtown businesses, those businesses for a limit of a certain number a year could say, look, I'm having something. It is our 50th anniversary of our restaurant, and we're going to have this. Can I get a permit to go till 11 o'clock? And I've granted those in the past, and I think we all agree that we should probably come up with, and I do those totally independent. It has nothing to do with council. So I think this would give us an opportunity within a certain spectrum, not carte blanche, but to look at someone who has got a really special something, and that's granted. But there's also that carrot you're holding over them that next year you came back for the same thing. Hey, that just led to nothing but hell all night long, and that's one of the beauties of us talking to Dan and Mike all the time. I think we get the basics of it. I think we all know what we want. We can put certain provisions in it. I like that carrot that you would get that revoked. That.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, and luckily we haven't had to deal with this, but I mean, it's similar to the city having a say in alcohol permits too. So like if you keep violating, if we keep having incidents at a certain establishment, we can approach the state to revoke their permit. So I mean, it gives us a certain ability to do that.
Every time Chris Schneider Bar and Grill is up for a renewal, we get a letter asking us whether or not we want to approve it or not.
Right.
So there's that avenue on their review, their renew, however often it is, and there's also, like Chris says, the ability where the city can just say, okay, this is out of control. We'll call the Division of Liquor.
Correct.
Well, I think we've got enough to get started for you guys. Joe's going to work on the motor vehicle part of it. I think it's unfair to Ken if we don't include that, though we know it shouldn't be in this portion.
Right.
Same chapter, different.
Different sections.
Different section, because it falls under the motor vehicle penalties, and it's different. But the other one will all be in one section, and it won't be in zoning. That's for sure.
Now, is there any, even though it's in a different, it's a motor vehicle ordinance. It's a moving violation. But is there any sense of the need to adjust the penalties for that?
That's a Joe thing. I don't know enough about that, but that's a Joe and Mike thing, because it has been a long-standing problem.
That's what I'm thinking, because again, the one thing that we have control over is, we can punish people more for a city ordinance violation than the state does for a state violation. So we could choose to make, a noise violation, a loud muffler, to be a more serious offense than what the state does.
Right.
So maybe that's one way we can differentiate ourselves and approach it in a way that takes it seriously, to say, well, okay, if you have a loud muffler, it's going to be X in the city of Loveland, which is more than what they get generally.
Okay.
Well, and the other thing about that too is I think it's certainly a difficult thing for the police to monitor that. They got a lot of things to keep track of, but there are certain aspects of this. There are certain residents or certain people that visit residents that are very predictable. While I was still on council, I had someone talk to me about the fact that at 6:30 every day a loud car went by, and it was the same guy in the same loud car, and it was every day. And I don't need to get into all those details, but my point is that's a situation where a police officer could literally come at 6:30 in the morning to that location, and if there's something that's enforceable on the books and so forth, then it's easy. That's what police officers do. They stop people and they give them citations, and so it's no big deal. But I think the more difficult one is the random one. That's not something we're ever going to solve. But these others, it seems like as long as it's there, and it's a big enough penalty, then it takes care of itself in that regard, as long as it's enforced.
Well, I'll give you an example. And I know what you're saying. And now, of course, the police, when they patrol, they can cite people for this as well, because it's a moving violation. So they can pull somebody over for loud muffler or whatever. But there are, certain jurisdictions that penalize people in a way that definitely it becomes a deterrent. I've worked as a prosecutor and magistrate in the city of Mount Healthy for a number of years, and the Mount Healthy ordinance regarding marijuana is much more serious than other places. And people can't believe the penalties they get when they get caught with possession of a minor amount of marijuana, which is a different debate to have. But my point is that people understand that in that city that you're going to pay a higher price for engaging in that activity, and it's just known. And so I think that there's nothing wrong if we're trying to tackle the issue of loud noises coming from cars. We can make it a more substantial penalty, and that could be the way that we impact that happening in the city. Is that something, Mr. Braun?
Yeah, we can address it. I will circulate to you the one we did for the revised one I did in Miami Township, which really goes into great detail of defining who gets cited and how they get cited. I think it's important. We also need to think about, like you said, we put the corporate liability section in there, but this is like when people hit the railroad trestle over here all the time and they appear in front of us in Mayor's Court. We're not citing U-Haul. If it's a U-Haul truck, we're citing the driver of the vehicle, who then might lose his CDL or whatever, because they're going to get points on their license. We need to think about, are we penalizing the business that hired them, the people that are playing, or we also need to think about, is it the homeowner or the people that are physically making the noise on the property? Because if someone is, for instance, renting out their property as a B&B or whatever, Airbnb, are we citing the owner or are we citing the people that are doing the noise? We really need to think about that, because the noise ordinance, although we've heard tonight a lot about the downtown district, we have to remember it is across the board in our community. Sure. And is it the person at the lawn service they've hired that's coming at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m.? Is it Rumpke? Is it the driver? We need to think about all those things. And we really spent a lot of time defining who was getting cited or who could get cited, because that also helps our officers. If someone's like, look, I didn't know I rented it, or, we just have to think about that. Where is the deterrent? I think that's the question.
Yeah. And just back to, just in closing, back to what Chris was talking, when you're perusing these, that would be on, Mason does it under what their section's called 511.15. That's where it's where they do, up and above things for basically. That's sort of just for reference.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, anyone? So we have a motion to, I assume there's no new business. You have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to
To
adjourn.
move to table this conversation till next time, or
Do we need to do that?
do we need to move?
No, it'll be old business on the next agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll second the motion to adjourn.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much.